Hello and welcome to the COP29 Daily Show in partnership with High Impact from the Olympic Stadium in Baku. I'm Rosanna Lockwood. Well, the focus here today at COP is on food, agriculture and water. But the negotiations also continue, and there are only 3 full days to go now before agreement is due to be reached on a massive new finance deal to help those suffering most from climate change. COP29 President Mukhtar Babayev has urged rich G20 countries meeting in Brazil to act quickly to reach a deal.
People have told me that they are concerned about the state of the negotiations. Let me be clear. I'm also concerned that the parties are not moving towards each other quickly enough. It's time for them to move faster. This week we will welcome ministers from around the world as the negotiations reach their final stage. Politicians have the power to reach a fair and ambitious deal. They must deliver on this responsibility.
Well, let's take a look at what's coming up in today's show, shall we? How can we make sure the world's poorest have enough food to eat? We speak to the head of Pakistan's Sustainable Development Policy Institute, Abid Qayyum, and saying our precious soil, Sadhguru tells us why it's at the heart of everything we grow. First, let's take a look, though, at how the way we produce our food contributes to climate change. Well, with me now here on the Daily Show is Abid Qayyum, who is Executive Director of Pakistan's Sustainable Development Policy Institute. Sir, very good of you to make time. And especially on a day where we're talking about food security, give us a sense of how pressing that issue has become.
You see, when we're talking of climate change, I think one of the most visible impact is on agriculture. The industry can be halted, transportation, it can take a pause, but the crops and the livestock, which are living organisms like human beings, they respond quickly to the changing temperature, to the changing weather patterns, rains, and most of the time it is the negative impact, and the negative impact actually leads to food insecurity and losses of livelihoods. And we have already seen it happening in Pakistan in 2022 floods, whereby now the UN statistics and World Food Programme, they are telling us that almost 10 to 15% population that was affected by this deadly floods. There is this increase in food insecurity, increase in poverty, increase in losses of livelihood. And that's why talking of agriculture and food system, which only entered in this climate change negotiation from COP28, it has become even more important. But the second important thing is that now with the interconnected and globalized world, the disruption in supply chain in food anywhere in the world, it would have a direct impact on food everywhere in the world. So it's not only an issue of Pakistan or Bangladesh or Tanzania, it is equally the issue of the United Kingdom or United States or Europe. And because our supply chains, they are interconnected, our foods, those are interconnected. And that's why today, in this the day which is marked for agriculture and food security, the discussion was going on. And one of the third important issue, it's not only about production and preservation, it was also about food waste. And I'm happy to report that today the Azerbaijani government and countries, they have launched a new drive for cutting in methane emission, something that started from Glasgow in COP26. And now the methane emission from organic waste. And organic waste is food which is dumped on these landfill sites. Those are a major contributor of methane, which is, of course, one of the ozone-harming gas. And that pledge has come through today.
So that's one really concrete bit of progress on methane emissions you're talking about there that has been, that has happened at this meeting. What other outcomes are you hoping for from this COP with regards to agriculture and food security?
Well, Rosanna, in real life, we have good COPs and bad COPs. In climate change negotiations, the COPs, the mere fact that they are taking place every year, it's in fact is a good omen, because it means that 197 plus parties to this convention, they get together. They make maybe progress at a snail pace, but there is progress, because these issues, they are not being hidden brushed under carpet. We know right now the major issue is climate finance, and there was this doom and gloom scenario till yesterday, G20's announcement, where G20 in Brazil, they have again reassured to fulfill and endorse the COP28 declaration, which talked of shifting away from fossil fuel. I think that is a good omen. We know on climate finance, it's about $1.4 trillion that are being demanded now. And there are three streams of finances. The first is the public money that should be there to kickstart energy transition. The second is the loss and damage. And third is this adaptation. Now, the first one is quite easy to manage. The second one, loss and damage, that is slightly in a slow process, because now there is an independent loss and damage board, and the granular details and nitty-gritty of it, that is being finalized there, which we know that it's a sort of slow starter. But the third one, adaptation, and we keep on focusing on mitigation, somehow adaptation that takes a backseat. I think that's where now we need to see some progress from developed countries and some emerging developing nations, which are now have increased their living standards and their incomes by manifolds. I think they also need to show heart. On climate finance, the latest proposal that was presented, that is voluntary contribution, both from developed and developing countries. I, not in my capacity as International Advisory Committee member of the COP29, but as a Pakistani representative, I think that there's a catch in it, and we need to see not only the quantity of finance, but quality of finance. And quality of finance means that these should not be loans. These should not be, even if there are loans, these should not be hard loans. It should be soft loans. So there should be very clear distinction between grants and loans, and accessibility and agency. Just to quote quickly, summarize quickly, the loss and damage for the flood, 2022 flood, it was estimated as $30 billion. In Geneva pledges 2 years ago, we were promised $10.4 billion. Till today, we have received less than $3 billion, which means that even if there are pledges, if you will have all these strings attached to those pledges and all the stringent conditions, and these are emergency and urgency pledges. So the funds, they have to be accessible, they have to be transparent, they should meet the urgency requirement, and we need to know very clearly who will be contributing what.
And you say that, again, as you're sort of in your role as a representative from Pakistan, as opposed to your other role as well. And look, we really appreciate getting your insights across food security and agriculture, but also that insight on the financing as well. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Well, let's go out to the Blue Zone now, shall we? Iman Danish Khan, founder of Earth Warriors Pakistan, is out there for us today. Iman, what have you been up to?
Hi, Rosanna. There has been a lot of talk about food and agriculture here today at COP29, and that climate change has really affected food and agriculture in my own country, Pakistan, and I'm going to talk about that later today in the show.
Thanks, Iman. Well, just some of the action there from COP29 today. And continuing our conversation, I'm very pleased to say I'm joined in the studio by the founder of the Isha Foundation, the influential and internationally recognised Sadhguru. So good to see you. Thank you
Wonderful,
very much.
Rosanna, to be here.
Look, we do obviously at COP talk a lot about the climate crisis, but can you talk to us why you think the soil crisis should be considered as well?
They're not different, first thing. See, unfortunately, our focus has been too much on fossil fuels. I'm not saying that's not a concern, it's a deep concern, no question about that. But if we want to shift from fossil fuels to something else, there must be something else. Right now, the alternative systems of generating energy are not even accounting for 3% of human requirement. So where are we going to bridge the 97%? That's not going to happen unless there is some kind of a technological breakthrough. Technological breakthroughs cannot be timed. When they happen, all right? People may be working on it, but you cannot say it'll happen tomorrow. But soil, which is the largest carbon sink on the planet other than the oceans, we're not making use of that. About 1 billion years ago, some algae or fungi evolved a methodology with which they could cook their food by using sun's energy or solar energy. This we call as photosynthesis. This photosynthesis, which is the basis of all life on this planet, unfortunately has gone down by 85% in the last 1,000 years. 85.
How has it got so bad?
This is a cycle. If you break the cycle, the other aspects of the cycle slowly collapse. So we started breaking this cycle in a serious way about 50 to 75 years ago. And now you are seeing other things collapsing. But this can be turned around if we make policies now. Within 8 to 10 years, we can make a significant turnaround for the soil and a huge difference for 50% of the population. And right now, Europe, United States, UK, everybody is complaining about migration. If the soils were rich, wherever the people are coming from, if they could make a good living, would they be dragging their women and children and coming to some strange country where they have no skills to survive?
Talk to us about the role that soil obviously plays in food security, given that we're talking to you on Food Day, because people might not make the linkage as to why they need to improve their soil quality in order to ensure that they have enough food.
I didn't know there was education needed on this. Maybe there are a
You'd
whole
be
lot
surprised,
of
yeah.
new generation thinking food comes from a supermarket. No, all that we eat comes from the soil. Plant, animal, everything comes from the soil. Everything that we know, our home is from the soil, our bodies are from the soil. Do we get it now? If we get it now, we can make a difference, we can turn this around, because it's still very much within the limits that we can turn this around. Otherwise, one day we'll get it from the maggots. It's a bit late.
So your goal for this COP is to continue that awareness, but also get it really considered seriously as part of climate policy?
Awareness is fine. Awareness, I worked on awareness with the Safe Soil movement because in a democratically run governments, without people making out a cry that we want this to happen, governments won't decide, because this is the, dicey thing about democracy, they get only 4 to 5 years.
And then it
How
turns
many
over.
politicians would want to take up something which would take 15, 20 years to give results? They want to do something which is within their term. So when that is the case, it doesn't get enough attention. Long-term aspects of life don't get attention in a democracy because they are fighting elections all the time. So this is very important that people, at least 60% of the adult population, if they clearly say this is important, only then they will make policies in that direction. We must have laws. We have come to that place where if we don't fix it by law, I do something out of my interest, you do something out of your interest, this is not good enough. We don't know what the next generation will do. So the important thing is, if you own agricultural land, minimum 3% organic content must be there, because soil and land is not your property, it's a legacy that's come to us from previous generations. It is a fundamental responsibility that we pass this on this way to the next generation. So these laws must happen initially by inspiration, then by incentive, then maybe punitive action if things don't work.
Sadhguru, thank you very much for sharing your
you.
wisdom, your expertise with our viewers. We really appreciate it. Well, coming up after the break, how climate change particularly affects Indigenous people. And we're back in the Blue Zone, speaking to farmers about how their lives have been changed by floods and drought. Welcome back to the COP29 Daily Show with High Impact. I'm Rosanna Lockwood. Now, let's get back out to Iman Danish Khan, who is out in the Blue Zone for us. Iman, what have you been doing today?
Hi, Rosanna. There has been a lot of talk about food and agriculture here today at COP29. And I've been talking to a lot of people impacted by climate change, many farmers and other people. And here's what I found out. My piece today had to start at the Pakistan Pavilion. Pakistan is where my climate journey really started. In 2022, Pakistan was hit by devastating floods. Over 33 million people were displaced. More than half of the country was underwater, and agriculture was greatly impacted, which is a great big deal because agriculture is one of our main sources of income. How has Pakistan's agriculture been recovering, and what were the impacts?
Pakistan has suffered a lot and still suffering, and due to the climate change, the farmer has been very much badly hit. We are trying our level best to work on the climate smart agricultural side and to come up with the innovative plans for the agriculture sector.
So now I'm going to speak with a cattle rancher from Colorado. How long have you been coming to COP?
Way too long. This is the pin from Kyoto. That was COP3. That was almost 30 years ago. Why do I come? Because in pavilions like this one, we are bringing together producers, activists, academics to talk about the real solutions. When you do agriculture right, regenerative agriculture, holistic grazing of animals, we take carbon out of the air and put it into the soil. It gives healthier food and healthier communities, healthier farmers. It's what we ought to be doing regardless.
Now I'm joined by another farmer who has a really interesting story.
I grew up in Mumbai. I moved to Luxembourg to become a banker. That was not my calling. I ended up in Ghana to do farming. It is very, very important that the world starts investing into agriculture. There is 1 billion people who are hungry every day. Hungry stomachs cannot fight climate.
So that basically gives you an idea of how climate change is affecting farming and food all over the world. I just hope that the loss and damage fund that we are establishing is big enough to mitigate the impacts that countries such as Pakistan are facing and other countries all around the world.
Wow, really great stuff there from Iman, meeting all those farmers in the Blue Zone. Now, to continue our conversation about food security and bring it to the link with Indigenous communities as well, I'd like to welcome to the studio Hindou Ibrahim from Chad, who is chair of the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. Thanks so much for making time. And you know, talk to us a little bit about what food security means for some of the Indigenous people that are represented here.
Thanks for having me. So for Indigenous peoples, we do not talk about food security. We talk about food sovereignty. Because if you have the food security, that means you just like waiting from someone else to do it. And that's what COVID showed us. When we close all the frontiers, the people who used to ship all the weights, all the food from another country or continent, they just like get blocked. So Indigenous peoples always talk about food sovereignty and food that is based on the ecosystem that we are living. So it's not every crop that can grow everywhere. It could be an invasive species. And that's how we are protecting our food.
And food goes so much further in some Indigenous communities with people too. It's more to do with identity, right? It's not just a sort of commodity anymore. Tell us more about that.
Right. Actually, for my own self, I'm coming from the community. I mean, my people call it Mbororo. And we are called it after our cattle, who's Mbororoji. So that means our relationship between our food and our milk, our meat is so deep. We are the people of the cattle. And it is the same for so many other indigenous communities, those who are in Latin America, living with the corn, who have like different variety of the corn, or with the potatoes, over 800 species of the potatoes. So of course for us it is an identity. It is not only the food that we can eat for the stomach, it is a way of life.
And so ensuring the survival, for example, of those types of cattle in Chad is important not only for food security and those issues and food sovereignty, but also for people's identity. Talk to us then about the way that climate change feeds into that, because countries that are vulnerable to climate shocks, we were hearing about Pakistan, but there are countries in Africa that really do suffer from climate change. They've also got to worry about food supply as well, haven't they?
When I hear just the reporting from the Pakistan, I just remember what's happening right now when we are talking here. My people are under flood. We have over 2 million people that displaced, become refugees in their own country because of the climate change issue. And that means we have hundreds and thousands and millions, I can say, hectares of the fertile land who are underwater. And our cattle died because of the flood. So of course, the food is going to be a big issue in the coming months, more than now. Now it is maybe 2-3 million people that need food. But in the coming months, it's going to be so many millions because they cannot get any crops that are cultivated. So climate change and the food are so related. Climate change impacts the land, the soil, the natural resources, and the people. And if you don't have food, of course, you cannot fight the climate change back.
So what kind of conversations, but more importantly, actions can be had to improve the situation? For example, for 2 million displaced people by floods in Chad, what can happen at meetings like this that can help provide solutions?
I think while we are speaking here, just putting a bracket into the wording, they rather think about the reality on the ground. Talk simply about the loss and damage. Where is the money? And people are not asking that as charity. They're asking because the money that they deserve. All of us who are getting impacted by the climate change there, we didn't emit the climate change. We didn't emit the greenhouse gases. It's the developed world. So developed world must stand up and put the real money in the tables. But I want to have the money that can go to the communities who are impacted. And what we do with the money is easy. In my organization, I work over years, and finally we get a woman land right. And those women are amazing. They are doing an agroecology during the rainy season and also during the dry season because they get water there. So the money can really go directly to those women who can work on the food security, fight climate change, get their children future. And that's all what we need, not only the bracket and talks.
And talk to me about, because it's so amazing to hear that type of change happening and where the funding goes to, but do you feel like you still, in your role, are having to fight to get Indigenous voices heard, or do you think meetings like this are making it easier?
They're definitely not making it easier. We are fighting every single day just to ensure that the Indigenous people's rights are in the text. I just come out from the ministerial on adaptation finance. That is started from 1, is going to end on 6. And the side of the discussion was very funny. Each developed country ministers who take the floor, they describe the impact of the climate change home. Each developed country, developing country express the impact. Developed countries, ministers are saying, oh, we do understand. We have to double the adaptation finance. But they say nothing. They never say, like in their wording, that we are going to commit in this COP29 at least 100 million or billions in the tables. They just say, we do understand and we can work on it. So this is what is happening right now. And when we ask about the Indigenous people's right to be there, our knowledge to be represented, they just ignore it. But we are the people who are making the impact on the ground, who are implementing the climate decision. If we are not into the decision text, how are we going to do it?
a very big and good point, well made. Look, and we really appreciate having you in the studio to have your voice heard here on the COP29 Daily Show. Hindou Ibrahim, thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Well, that is indeed all we have time for on today's show. So let's take a look at what's coming up tomorrow at COP29. The focus is on urbanisation, transport and tourism. At 9 a.m. on the first ever Tourism Day at COP, talks on how tourists and destinations can make your trips more sustainable. At 1 p.m, ministers and mayors from around the world discuss how to make cities resilient to climate change. And at 4:30, exploring what could be done to decarbonise international aviation. So that is all we have time for today. Do join us again. Goodbye.